My opponent says that prisons are good because they provide big business for the economy, saying prisons generate profit for the economy, and abolishing them altogether would lead to drastic economic decline, which may pose a variety of impacts such as increased risk of terrorism, job loss, etc. I refute this entire argument because it is simply untrue. My opponent failed to mention how in my opening I said that prisons should be abolished over time and not outright, and that initiatives should be taken to prevent expansion precisely to avoid these so-called impacts. By slowly diminishing the number of prisons until they are obsolete, governments have enough time to figure out a resolution to address the money they will lose from the industrial complex, not to mention use the $16 billion that they spend per year on inmates and put it into something more useful. My opponent's description of the impacts of economic decline is an extreme exaggeration. In a capitalist society, people and companies will do anything and sink to any level in order to keep the cash flowing, even if it's at the expense of those who have little in life to begin with. He uses scare tactics by naming terrorist organizations that may take over the U.S. if the economy declines, and uses 9/11 as an example, but his argument is invalid because when 9/11 occurred, the economy was fine and prisons existed. However, following the attacks, the U.S. went to war, and the country went to a recession, and economic decline occurred while prisons were still around, completely nullifying the opposition's argument. His plan also identifies the problem right on the head. The economy indeed thrives on the prison industry, and with the enormous sum that it contributes, it will do anything to keep it that way. This means the further subjugation of a large portion of the population who already face injustice in life because of the color of their skin. If you don't believe me, take a look at the Bureau of Justice statistics showing the disproportionate number of Black and Hispanics in prison, jailed for committing crimes that non-minorities could commit just as often. They just have access to better lawyers. One of the impacts of economic decline, he states, is unemployment. Again, he is only expressing concern for the haves over the have-nots, since according to the BLS, minorities have twice the unemployment rate as whites, despite making up far less people in the total population. He counters my plan by stating that having more cameras can reform prisons. If we take a look at recent racial injustices in the news, we will see that Black men are killed every day, even while being recorded, facing light or no punishment whatsoever, and he is ignorant to names such as Eric Garner and Walter Scott, which have been making headlines for some time now. Finally, he accuses me of lying in my opening speech. However, if he listens to it again, he will be able to find that much of the information I used was taken from the U.S. Bureau of Justice. Second, I do not need to state sources for the arguments that I make because as a person of color who spent most of their life growing up in a crime-ridden, low-income part of New York City, my anecdotes and personal experience with unfair treatment towards minorities far outweigh any source I can quote because a list of words and numbers do no justice for the pain and suffering of millions of minorities in the U.S. My opponent has no empathy for these things because his argument focuses on wealthy corporations whom he wants to make more money, further perpetuating the rich getting richer phenomenon and pushing minorities even further into a downward spiral, and will do anything include exaggerate the potential impacts of abolition to sway the decision. The arguments he exaggerates exemplify the heart of racial injustice today, and because he has no real counterplan other than cameras that have no evidence of solving human rights violations, I should win this debate.